Just want to welcome you all to this event tonight. I'm the Director of Marketing and Communications for the National Museum of African American Music. The museum is scheduled to open first quarter of 2020, and it serves for the single mission of spreading the good word and celebrating, preserving, and educating the people on the role African Americans play in creating the soundtrack of America. So has everybody seen all the traffic and commotion over on 5th and Broadway, where the museum is being built? Has anybody seen the construction? Yeah, so we're very excited about what's going on over there, and we appreciate all your support. So tonight, we gather to talk about a legend and an icon and a trailblazer, Quincy Jones. So this screening and talk back will discuss all of his life's work and his many contributions. He is a friend of the project and the museum, and we do expect to see him here next year when it opens. His work is not only just phenomenal, but it has transcended racial and cultural boundaries, and he is completely entwined into the fabric of America. So we're glad that you guys came to see some of the excerpts from this film and to join in this rich conversation. And I'd like to pass it on to our illustrious moderator, Mr. Shannon all caps Sanders.
He is the definition of the role. To be a producer is a craft, and he is the definition of the craft. And so I really couldn't think of anything that I would want to do more, anybody that I would be more honored to moderate a panel about other than the illustrious Quincy Jones. So I'm glad to be here. I'm glad that all of you are here. And how many of you have seen the documentary? Any of you seen the documentary? Okay. So those of you that have seen it know it's phenomenal. So, and for those of you that haven't, it's on Netflix. Do yourself a favor, check it out. Check it out. So we'll jump right on in. So again, my name is Shannon Sanders. Tonight we will take a unique approach to looking at the illustrious career of Quincy Jones. We've broken the documentary down into 3 segments that only touch the surface of his career. We've invited some industry thought leaders out tonight to lead us into deeper discussion of Quincy's influence. Joining us tonight, the one and only Music Queen, a native of Music City with an extensive career. Yeah, you show us some love. And she's my friend. Yeah. I mean, she's got to be your friend if she lets you hold her purse. Yeah, right. She's had an extensive career in the music business for almost 20 years, and that includes artist management, copyright clearance, mechanical licensing, and royalty processing, to name a few. She has worked for some of the biggest companies in the game, such as Sony Music Entertainment, Sony ATV Music Publishing, and EMI Music Publishing. And her duties included clearing and verifying writers and publishers' song splits for releases from artists the likes of Chris Brown, Outkast, Sierra, Alicia Keys, and more. Music Queen, all right? Next to her is a legend in the Ville, my man, Ron Wynn. Show him some love. Ron is a music critic, author, former ferryman, I didn't know that, Ron, and all-music editor. Wynn was the editor of the first edition of the All Music Guide to Jazz in 1994, and from 1993 to 94 served as the jazz and rap editor for the All Music Guide. Wynn has contributed to publications such as Billboard, The Village Voice, The Nashville Scene, Cream Rock and Roll Disc, Living Blues, and the Boston Phoenix. Let's give a round of applause to our participants. Yeah. All right, so here's how this is going to go down. We'll start off with a preview well, I'll tell you what, this is how we'll do it. We'll watch a bit of the documentary, and one of our thought leaders will discuss the themes of the documentary, and then we'll open up the floor to comments and questions from you all. So we'll get right into it, and I think that I'm first. And so just to get it going, like I was saying earlier about Quincy, and you'll see, and I've got some facts. That's what I was sitting here. I wasn't just texting up here while Dion was introducing me. If you saw me on my phone, I was looking at some of these quotes that we pulled for Quincy, and he just had a phenomenal career. We're not going to have time to watch the whole documentary. So some of these things you may see, but you got to know a few of these. You have to know that in 1961, Jones became the first vice president of Mercury Records and was the first high-level black executive in an established major label record company. I think he was still in his 20s, so 1961, he was the first real black music exec. Jones was the first black composer to be embraced by the Hollywood establishment in the 60s. He helped refresh film scores with infusions of jazz and soul. 63, he scored The Pawnbroker, which would turn out to be the first of his nearly 40 major motion picture scores. He scored a theme from the movie Ironside, which was the first synthesizer-based pop theme song. 64, he was hired by Frank Sinatra to arrange and conduct his second album. And also, he was Sinatra's band leader. I think he may have still been in his 20s when he took over Sinatra's band as well. Just a few more. I mean, his career is crazy. Like, I can only scratch the surface right now. It's crazy. 68, produced the soundtrack of The Wiz, Michael Jackson's solo albums, Off the Wall, Thriller, Bad, over 100 million copies sold. What else? I mean, Fresh Prince of Bel-Air is him. Vibe magazine is him. You know, I mean, it's so many things. You've got to see the documentary. And even with the documentary, you're just scratching the surface. So you got to really got to know and understand, especially black music. But I will further say American music. He really is a national treasure. Quincy is a national treasure. And you'll see some of that, but do yourself a favor and check out the whole documentary. Again, available on Netflix. All right, so I think we're ready to just go ahead and jump on in. I think we ought to just take a look at the first clip, and then we'll come back and talk a little bit about it.
For those of you that haven't seen this is what I'm saying. This man is the definition of the craft. That's why I wanted to be here. This is why he is so important. I just jotted down a few notes. And I wanted you to see that last part because I knew it was going to go to the younger Quincy doing the same thing, but I wanted you to see where he is now because he is older and why we should cherish him and why I say he is a national treasure. A lot of people would, so what you saw him do was produce. What you saw him in the studio was produce. What it is to be a producer is to be the biggest opinion in the room. That's really the bottom line. So to give you a definition of, because a lot of people don't know what a producer does. A lot of people don't know what a producer does. So this is my definition of producer. To produce is to bring forth, all right? So in the same way that an orange tree produces oranges, banana tree produces bananas, we bring forth performances from musicians, from writers, from engineers, from the artists themselves, the environment. If an artist comes in the studio and it's too cold, then it is my duty to produce a warmer environment. If they want water, a lot of times singers come, they don't like cold water. They want room temperature water. It's my job to produce warm temperature water. That's your job. Make it happen. That's what produce means. And so the thing that makes Quincy the ultimate is, and hopefully, and I'm not sure which clips we'll see tonight, which parts of the clips, but to know that he first was a trumpet player, a phenomenal trumpet player, and arranger, and student of the game. Like the kind of producer he is now just doesn't happen often. And that's the thing. So hopefully you'll get to see some of that tonight. Definitely when you go back and watch the documentary, when you understand how musical he is, and just how deep his creativity and his musical understanding goes. And that's the thing, like him coming into pop music was later. He'd already, and even as a young man, had a jazz career. He'd already spent time overseas. So by the time he made it to popular music, he was like, man, whatever. And he was probably in his late 20s at this point. So it was something that he took on and he thought would be easy, and he saw the challenge in it. So that's the thing about Q. A couple more things I want to say too before we open it up about him. You saw where he talked about the players. One thing that I got from Quincy years ago from reading his book about production, he said that the biggest thing about being a producer, and this always stuck with me, the biggest thing is to call the right man for the job. Now, I'm a keyboard player myself, but if I'm not the right man for the job, I got to know to get my ego out the way, get myself out the way, and call the right man for the job. So when you look at the guys he got, you got to understand who these guys are. Greg Fillingane's on key. Man, Greg's the coldest. He's the coldest. Rod Temperton. You know, the story goes with Rod and Human Nature, they were really about done with that album, and they listened to I don't know how many songs, but the track to Human Nature was done. It was just an instrumental. There were no words. And so he heard the instrumental, and he was like, you know what, I got to get that to Rod. Rod wrote the words to Human Nature, and Human Nature was born, and so it is what we know Human Nature to be now. So that's the thing, it's like it's the well with him is so deep. Johnson on bass, he was one of the guys from Brothers Johnson, incredible bass player. You go back and listen to those Brothers Johnson records. Quincy produced those records, but the musicianship was so crazy. So that was the thing, you know, for him to produce, for him was, and it means a different thing now, but for him it was getting the right people in the room. That's what you got to know. So if you're going to make a cake, and it's important to you to go, I got to go, you know how it is, Thanksgiving, you got to go out north and you got to go and get that right piece of turkey meat for the greens to be right. You know where you got to go to get that. You know where you got to go to get this ingredient, to get that ingredient. That's what making a record is. But the ingredients are the people, the cast, and the characters. So that's what Quincy was the master at. Real quick, what he saw in Michael, you know, it's funny because you see right there that the records we love, we wouldn't have those records if it wasn't for Quincy. As creative as Michael is and all of that, like a lot of that was Mike. But again, to bring forth. And so his job was to bring that out of Mike. Whatever made Mike comfortable is what he did. And so he got that out of Mike. And so you saw Mike in the beginning. You saw how he was, but his confidence grew. And you saw his confidence grow as time went on. But that was Quincy pulling that out of him as he became more confident in not only the music and in Quincy, but in himself. Thriller was done in 2 months. That's crazy. That's the last thing I was going to say. Think about that. Thriller was done in 2 months. Like, I can't tell you how crazy that is. We did NDRE's record, Voyage to India. So the first Grammy I won was for India's second record, Voyage. We did that in 3 months. And I'm talking about, I didn't come outside. Like, there were days I for real didn't go outside. Like, there was a label person, just straight up, they had a label person assigned to me to not let me leave the building for like a week. Like, towards the end of the record, like, this is like, whoa, where you going? Like, bro, I just really want to see the sun, man. I just really, if I could just go outside, because most studios don't have windows, and so you don't have a concept of time. And it was like, man, I really need the vitamin D really badly. So that being the case, yeah, we just open it up. If anybody has any questions, I think I have a couple of lead questions for you. But yeah, anybody have any questions or comments about what you saw in this clip?
I think what's really noted in what we just watched, I hadn't seen the whole documentary, but even in what we just watched, I think a lot of people who attempt to be producers in this day and age don't realize the work ethic that he had to have, you know, to get from being a jazz player to being a music mogul he is today. Like you said, not leaving the studio for a whole week, but drive people insane. And I think that's really underscored these days because anybody can get a setup in their bedroom, but you know, just the level of expertise he held himself to and then what he expected out of everyone around him, I think is what made him who he is. And that's the spark that he saw in himself, I guess, to keep going. So I just wanted to make that comment.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And to build on what you said, you know, it's easy. You know what? And let's just put it on the glass right now. You know, I say it all the time. We got a lot of folks who make beats. We don't have a lot of producers. There's a big difference between beat makers and producers. And so you're absolutely right. You can't go to Guitar Center right now. Everybody in here can have a studio tonight. Like, you can go and get, for real, like, you can have more power on a laptop than they had in the studio back then in terms of gear. But the power for them was in the people and not in the gear. So that was the thing. And so another thing that made Quincy brilliant was that he was able to communicate his thoughts and ideas to these brilliant musicians. And so, but he had to speak the language. And so that goes back to his time as a player and arranger, because he could communicate to each player as it related to their instrument. So yeah, I mean, brilliant. Anybody else? All right. We'll keep it moving. So let's watch the next clip, and this next clip is about Quincy's work in big band and in jazz. So you'll get to see some of that, and you'll get to understand how he got to where he got to. And then we'll talk to Gwen, to Ron, after we watch this next clip. Writing those parts out. He's sitting at a piano and orchestrating that by hand. So that's what they meant by write. Well, he was making that up. So you see how incredible he was. So he had already done all of that, and then by the time he was running Frank's band, and that was Count Basie on piano. So that was the Basie orchestra. That was Count Basie on piano with Quincy Jones directing at 29 years old, running the Frank Sinatra band, the coldest band in the world at the time. And so you see the impact he had, and he's moving around with Frank Sinatra. So the impact he had on Sinatra became the impact that Sinatra had on the world, the impact that he had on racism in Las Vegas. You got to understand that that's how deep Quincy is. That's what makes him such a treasure. So at this point, Brother Wynn, talk to us.
All right, thank you, Shannon. I guess the first thing that I think is very important to remember about Quincy Jones is that first and foremost, he considers himself a jazz man. That underscores everything that he does. Now, he doesn't consider himself a jazz man in a narrow sense of the term. And even when he was just getting started, he started out with Lionel Hampton at 19 years old. But even when he was just doing big bands and concentrating on jazz, he was also studying classical composition with Nadia Boulanger in France. And one of the things that's not brought out in that film, but that's very important, is that during the time that he was touring in Europe with the various bands and studying classical composition, he was also working for Barclay Records. And Barclay Records was an imprint of Mercury. And that's how, when he came back to New York in 1961 and applied for the job at Mercury Records, he could say, well, okay, I had 2 years experience in the record business. And so they hired him. And also, another thing that wasn't mentioned is he worked with Frank Sinatra before. He first worked with Frank Sinatra in 1958. But in 1964, which is when they picked it up, that's the part that they focused on. But everything that you've seen up to now, as far as why he's such a great producer, was honed and created when he was doing jazz things. The big band years, the writing, the conducting, the arranging, all of that he learned during the jazz period early in his career. All right, one other thing that's very important is that he's a multi-instrumentalist. In addition to trumpet, he also plays French horn, plays piano, synthesizer, bass. So here's talking about somebody that knows multiple instruments and also knows classical composition too. So when he went to film scores, it was no big thing because he already knew the techniques of both jazz and classical music. So we're talking about somebody who is ultra knowledgeable in multiple idioms. Then you take that and you bring that into the world of pop, R&B, and soul, and it's a natural transition because he's always seen all of these idioms as interconnected. He's never seen jazz as a distinct music from anything else. He's seen it as part of the overall Black music tradition, and that's how he's always approached the world of music in general. One other thing about the Leslie Gore thing, which is interesting, and if you read his book, Shannon, but he talks about the fact that there were executives at Mercury that said, well, how can a Black man produce records for a young white girl? What does he know about that? And he said, well, just give me a shot. And of course, you get 20 hits out of that shot. Quincy's always been a very, very confident individual. And that confidence comes from the fact that if you're 19 years old and you're playing second trumpet for Lionel Hampton, you better be able to hold your own, and he could. And then later on, he's leading bands all over Europe. That musical, by the way, that he assembled the big band for, that show was written by Harold Arlen. Harold Arlen, among many other things, wrote the score for The Wizard of Oz. So that's one other thing that Quincy Jones got involved in very early. And of course, so then many, many years later came The Wiz. So that's another natural connection. So his whole life has just been about evolution and transitions and just going from A to B to C.
Yeah.
Okay.
Awesome.
I don't know, have I used, I know we're using about 8 minutes now, but.
We can open the floor. Does anybody have any questions? Comments?
Given that he started at such a young age, can you talk about his influences, his jazz influences? So I thought it was even before 19 when he started playing.
Well, he was 19 when he joined Hampton. They started playing earlier than that.
Right.
But his first influence was Clark Terry. And Clark Terry was one of his early trumpet instructors.
I got a question. So I remember watching the movie Ray, and so when you met Ray Charles, was that in France or was it in the States?
No, that was in the States.
Okay, but was he on his way to France at that time?
No, that was in Seattle. That was dramatic license, we'll say.
Oh, because I thought that what it was saying was that he was starting when he was in his early teens. Was he ever in France, or was that?
Oh yeah,
all-
no, he spent yes, he was in France.
That's
Yeah.
right, because that's where this one the
Right.
clip was starting from.
Yeah, he toured Europe for 6 years, leading various big bands, and he worked in Paris from '57 to 1961.
Okay, so he was pretty young at that
Yeah.
point. We're talking about late teens, early 20s.
Right. And
How
he
did he
wasn't an
get-
old man when he joined Mercury either. I mean, he was still a fairly young man then.
But how did he get there?
So how'd you get to
To
Mercury?
France.
Oh, well, okay. He started out doing State Department sponsored tours. And then because they were so successful, they said, well, why don't you do this on a regular basis? So then afterward, Harold Arlen contacted him to do that Broadway musical that you saw up there. And he had such a good time doing that. He said, well, I want to lead a big band. And so they formed the big band in 1960. And then he said he learned a very important lesson from that big band, which is the difference between music and the music business. Because it was a great artistic triumph, but they didn't make any money.
One more question, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
So, but was he ever classically trained in any of those instruments how did he learn? Was that just something he picked up by ear? Did he take lessons?
Well, we did both, yeah. But as far as classical music goes, the time he studied with Nadia Bollinger, he learned symphonic orchestration and composition at the Paris Academy. Which is something not that many black musicians have done,
That's
by
what
the way.
I wanted to ask more, but
I
I'm
wasn't
sorry.
gonna-
I feel like
I thought
I'm
that was
asking
kind of
too
obvious.
much. Because I'm sitting here looking, I'm like, he's black. So how did he even get into any of this stuff? Where did it come from?
What made him amazing is that he learned it in its pure form, but then he turned around and applied soul to it.
Mhm.
So that's why when he came back, that's what we hear when, we talking about scoring movies. You watch a movie, you mute a movie and watch it. It's not the same. When you watch The Color Purple, all of the mood music, everything, every piece of music you hear during The Color Purple, it's him. He produced The Color Purple. So that's the thing is when you hear that, all the songs, Sister, all of those songs from Color Purple, that's all him. The swelling, the strings, the things you don't really pay attention to, but to create a mood, that's what he learned. And that's what he was able to apply. Hey, Barry.
While we're looking for that section that Shannon just mentioned, can you talk about how the jazz improvisation that he learned just in the clubs, working for different artists in his teens and early 20s, helped him transition into the classical kind of mind frame? What are the traits of the jazz element that helped him in that?
Well, okay, there's multiple answers to that question, but I guess the first one is understanding in the fact spontaneity, the emphasis on spontaneity. All right, that's the first thing. When you talk to people who have recorded Quincy Jones, they'll always tell you that he's always looking for a spark, and that he doesn't like to do tons and tons and tons of takes. He likes to get it while it's fresh, get it while it's hot. All right. The second thing is in terms of harmonic training and understanding. That's critical, because when you're in the big bands and you've got multiple instruments and you're writing for sections, then you learn about harmonization and solos and who's best equipped to do what. All right, apply that to production. If you know what you want, then you go out and get the best musicians, and you let them then develop whatever it is that you want to get developed. Like when he talked about human nature and just having an instrumental track, and he knew who to take the track to get the words. Well, if you don't have the musical ear, and also you don't understand the connection between lyrics and music, then you're not going to be able to make that kind of decision. So everything that he does as a producer is tied in to that jazz background of being a trumpet section player, a big band conductor, a big band arranger, and a writer for big bands. I hope I answered your question.
Just to show you a little bit of this, just so you understand what we mean in terms of, just to be able to see a little bit of Quincy's classical background, just to understand like what he put himself through to be able to come out on the other side like this. Quincy was 50 years old when he produced Thriller. Right. He was 50 when he produced Thriller. So it's crazy to think, like, you know, think about all the string arrangements and all of the lushness on Michael's records. That's what that was. That was easy money, just because of his classical background and his orchestration background. All of that. By the time he brought that to pop music, easy money. Wow. All right. So we'll keep it moving. Any more questions before we do? You got to start. Question? No, not just. Okay.
It has to do with like Quincy and like I'm 27 and I played the violin when I was 14. I never knew about Quincy Jones. It was something I had to go into myself. And I think it's like it would be like a great thing just to get his knowledge in the schools, because black kids are talented, but if we don't know, then we don't know. Like I didn't know Color Purple was like in high school. Like we learned about Color Purple, but they didn't know like the music was orchestrated by him.
And Roots. Color Purple and Roots.
And we studied those too, but they never let us know. So it's crazy. So this is like all information to me. Like.
Way to plug there.
All right. It's crazy. It's amazing. 40 films.
Way back.
Yeah.
The Pawnbroker, In Cold Blood. I mean, a lot of films that you don't think a black man did. He scored.
Now watch this. He wrote the Sanford and Son thing. That's him. That's Quincy. That's Quincy. Yeah. He made that up. Like that's Quincy. Just so you understand how important he is to us. This is how important Quincy Jones is to us.
They should have like a Quincy Jones class, right?
Hey. Yeah. All right. All right. So we're going to keep going. Now we're going to see how Quincy identified the similarities between jazz and hip hop to create a fresh sound. Now let me take this too, and it's one of the things I thought about. You know, you got to think that, you know, for what jazz, you know, when we think jazz now, jazz is legacy music. But, you know, I tell folks all the time, you got to remember, even classical was the rock of his time. Beethoven, Bach, Mozart, boys were rock stars during their time. Like they lived like rocks, like Led Zeppelin and Motley Crue. Boys were rock stars at the time. So you have to know that classical was the pop music of its time. The same thing with jazz, and that's what he was saying about being with Sinatra. They were on top of the world. Jazz was what hip hop is now. So that's what you kind of have to really put in that, to put that in perspective. That was the expression of young black America. Now, it was just like hip hop has been adopted and adapted since. You know, everybody has their version of hip hop and does hip hop, and you feel it in everything, country to reggae to in everything has a little bit of hip hop in it now. Same thing, and that's the thing. And jazz had the same kind of carry at the time. What hip hop is now, R&B was rock and roll. Before that, jazz. So just understand, it was the expression of young Black America at the time. So as we move into this next segment, you'll see that. Yeah, I mean, you see it. And I mean, I couldn't help but sit there and think about, what's next. There's an old church song that says, if I can help somebody as I pass along, if I can cheer somebody with the word of song, if I can show somebody that traveling wrong and my living shall not be in vain. That's what that reminded me of, and just for him to be able to use the platform for good. So you saw him do his thing, make music and become a musical force, but then to turn around and to become such a humanitarian and such an influential world citizen is powerful. So we open it up. Yes, ma'am.
When you look at his life and the comments you made that he said, making music and music industry are two different things. Did he do anything to kind of help the young upcoming talent artists understand the music and what's involved on that side as opposed to just the studio side?
Oh yeah, I mean that's the thing. I mean, and you see it woven in everything he does. I mean, he's such a mentor. I had the honor of meeting him one time, and even then, he just makes you feel like you're the only person in the room. So that's another one of his gifts. He definitely has a people gift. And you saw at the symposium how, I mean, you're talking about some of the most gangster rappers in the game at the time. But he had them on the edge of the seats and hang on every word. Some of those guys, it's a trip to see them be so respectful, especially in the same room. So he had a tremendous impact and still does on young people. When you know and understand what all he's accomplished. And but to answer the question, yes, very much so. He's a passionate mentor.
Hi, everybody. Hello. I'm Music Queen, and I am going to speak on the fusion Quincy brought with hip hop. And for all of you that don't know, I'm kind of like the urban music hip hop advocate here in Nashville, trying to help the urban music community here have a voice and a platform and things like that. And so as I watch that, me being a product of the hip hop generation, like that's when I grew up, that's my era, and I remember having distinct conversations with my dad, because he's a Brothers Johnson's kind of era of a guy. And hip hop, he was just like, I'm not too sure about this genre of music right here. And so we would have conversations about it and, go back and forth, and he really just could not, mostly the cursing and the language that was involved in is what he really couldn't get past. But I remember when Back on the Block came out, this was the album that unified our conversation versus divided our conversation. Because of Quincy Jones being able to bring in rappers so I could talk about my side. And then my dad could talk about his side because it was all inclusive on one piece of art. And another funny story, this is, CDs were just kind of coming into the most popular form of playing and listening to music. And my dad had bought a CD player, and Back on the Block was that first CD that he had bought. And he had to return the CD player 3 times because he thought it wasn't working. He's putting the Back on the Block CD in and putting it in, and it's not playing. And it's not playing. And he's like, man, I just bought this thing. So he goes back, brings it home, does it again, put it in there, and still not playing. So he goes back to the store, and the guy's like, well, man, show me what you're doing wrong, because it's working here. Turns out he's putting the CD in the wrong way. He thinking the words where it is, but it was the Back on the Block CD that he was trying all this on that time. Also, what's special about this album and bridging and things like that, I'm sorry, I'm speaking from personal experience. This is how he has touched me and ushered in. When I was very young, around that age, we also had a New Year's Eve party. This was a legendary New Year's Eve party that we had at our house. And the Back on the Block album was like the soundtrack for that party that night. You know what I mean? Like the kids, we were all in one room, and it was almost one of the first times that you had the parents and the kids partying together to the same music. To the same music. It was no, this is yours, y'all go over there and listen to that rippity rap, whatever. And we got our stuff over here. So he was excellent at bridging the gap, not only with the genres, but with the generations, you know, and bringing us all together, and we could appreciate this art together and bond together and laugh together and dance together and be together. Hip hop generation and the Brothers Johnson generation. And so that's what resonates with me as I watch this, because it brings back real memories of what Quincy Jones did for me personally. You know, outside of his greatness and his talent, but he was able to touch our household with his craft. And that's what resonates with me. So, especially with hip hop and it being so new at the time, and you know, older people saying that's not music, that's not music, that's not music. It's just racket and noise. And Quincy could see and appreciate the music, and then was able to give voice. And I'm looking at like, well, maybe my dad is like, well, if Quincy can appreciate it, maybe I should be more open-minded. And he was, and so then he started to listen more. And then, you know, started to like a little Biggie and a little Snoop here and there. The edited version, because he didn't want to hear all that. But nonetheless, he was being more open because of the bridging of the gap that Quincy was able to do. And so that's what I appreciate about his craft and who he was as a person, and being open and not shutting out the young people, and being like, let me hear your voice and give you, you know, a platform and a way to embrace you, because I understand it's just what you're dealing with, and you're just expressing yourself. And me as a creative, I understand that. I've walked that walk. I've already been there. So I get you, I understand you, I embrace you. I'm not gonna shun you and talk down to you. I'm gonna love on you and show you the way, and show you that you don't have to be, because like we saw, that was the height of the East-West Coast War, and it was a really dark time in hip hop. And it's almost, you know, feeding into and making what my dad was saying true. And I couldn't be able to justify the greatness that it had if all of this is going on. So I appreciate, I remember that summit on TV and, you know, things like that. Like I was a junior or senior in high school during that time. So all of this is very nostalgic for me, watching it and reliving those emotions, because hip hop was so new at that time. And it was, you know, just trying to find understanding of the olders and what it is we like it now. I must say, I now understand what my dad's saying with today's hip hop. I'm just like, what is this? I don't get it. But nonetheless, I am open. So yeah, I think that's about it that I have to offer on what Quincy had to contribute in bridging the gap between hip hop and jazz. And like I said, the generations, and bringing people together and being able to have a conversation and dialect and understanding what hip hop was at that time versus just like, I don't get it, I don't want to hear about it. You go on and that's your thing. You know, me and my dad were able to bond. And my dad had an extensive music collection. That's where I get my passion and love for music was from my father. So for us to be able to engage in dialect and conversation about the music and things like that, and then for it to lead into hip hop and us be able to have that conversation was very meaningful to me. So yeah, go ahead.
On the Block release?
89.
I wasn't born.
Yeah, 89. But go back and listen to it. Like it has
My
some great.
generation, we listen to We Are the World. That's what my mama made me.
Oh, okay. No, Back on the Block is a great album. I mean, it has Secret Garden, on it. You know, it's got some great ballads, some great hip hop tracks, some great R&B tracks, some feel good stuff. Like it's just a great piece of work. So definitely go listen to it if you haven't already. And if you have, pick it back up again and bring it back and listen and, you know, get them memories going. That's a good thing about music. It always can take you back to a feeling and a place of, you know, man, I remember it was so sunny outside and it was breeze. Like you can feel exactly that moment you were in when you were listening to that. So I encourage you, please go pick up his anything in his catalog. You know, everybody knows Michael Jackson is my favorite entertainer of all time. And what he was able to do production-wise and things like that for Michael, like Quincy is the reason I am a Michael Jackson fan. You know what I'm saying? He was able to bring out the best elements of Michael and elevate it to that next level. So, yeah. All right, I saw a couple of hands. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, you know, one thing that you left off at is what has happened with the charge that he put to the people in the hotel room about, you know, they're real bullets out there, and you all need to get involved in politics and what have you. What has happened with that? It seems like we have been regressing from that, and we can't lose.
Right.
I think what he was talking about was the potential and the energy that generation has, that music has, and it's all going in the wrong direction.
Right. The influence that it had and the power that it had to shape.
No. Going forward, it's all going in the wrong direction.
Yeah.
It's all going backward.
Yeah. I think when Obama was in office, we had a good surge. You had a lot of hip hop people standing with Obama, getting people out to vote and do things.
Out more
now, yes, I will agree. We need to be out more now.
Y'all be out more now.
Yeah,
you know?
you. I will not disagree with you there.
Okay. You know, I don't want to.
No, it's quite all right.
I say it all the time. A big problem is that black people don't control black media anymore. We lost a lot of power back in the day. What happened was, you know, back when Motown was Motown, what happened was Motown sold out to Universal. Stax wound up going and being under, I think, Atlantic. What happened was maybe late 60s, early 70s, the big labels came and swallowed up the little ones. That's when we could say what we wanted, how we wanted. That's what that was. So the power in Quincy doing what he did with Quest Media, when you saw him have Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, we saw him at Vibe magazine. That's what was so powerful, is that he launched the media company. And so he was in control. That was a black man in control of black media. That's what that was. And so by and large, we're not right now. And so what happens is that the worst of us is a lot of times is what's being amplified, unfortunately. Now, there's still a lot of great music being made, but unfortunately what we see is, and a lot of what we hear, what's being amplified is that something about the worst of us is entertaining to everybody else but us. Everybody else seems to be entertained by the worst of us other than us.
What I can say was about the hip hop not being in control in the mainstream image. When I was 15, I was introduced to Nipsey Hussle, and I didn't take it as his music, it was his message. He was about group economics. He was about black love, black empowerment. Mainstream hip hop, it do suck. I don't listen to it. I listen to underground.
Right.
Every underground artist right now, independent.
Right.
They're not talking about that. They don't want the kids to know.
Right.
You can do like Jay Prince.
Right.
Put on for your city.
Yeah.
Give them a voice. But that's not what the elders are hearing. They're hearing
Right. They hear mainstream.
crap.
That's no point. We are not control of mainstream.
Yeah.
That's it. We're in front of the camera, but we're not behind the scenes. You had more black executives in the 80s in the music business than you do now.
Yeah.
Real talk.
I think like with what I've noticed, the passing of Nipsey, it's really bringing the youth together. It's making them realize like, hey, okay, I might, when I was younger, I probably did start gangbanging, but that don't mean I have to in the way that all these movies and all of that, like, this man didn't even win a Grammy.
Mm-hmm.
And his service was at Staples.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Like, that alone should let you, like, listen to his music. His, like, last two, like, projects he put out was everything about if you got a dream, go for it. That was it. And that's what made my little brother listen to it. It was a 16-year-old. And he's like, who do I listen to now? I'm like, go back. Like, listen to the music that I listen to, because they're really just brainwashing these kids now, because they're making them thinking about, like, it's about the drugs, it's about the money. And it's not about that. Like, it's really artists out here who really have a message and it's about something. Like Quincy Jones.
Right.
But if you don't know, you're not gonna know.
That's real. You know, I say this too all the time, you know, and it's funny with Nipsey too, not funny, but it's ironic, because I was just at his store. I bought one of those Crenshaw shirts 3 months ago. I was right at his store where he got killed. So, you know, it's just a trip that he's gone. But here's something I tell folks is that everybody's right. Everybody's right. Everything you're saying, everybody's right. You know, but one thing that I've been telling folks, especially young folks, is that Crip, Blood, you know, red, blue, Republican, Democrat, same thing. Crip, Blood, Alpha, Kappa, Sigma, Q, AKA Delta, same thing. It's an organization. It's not the fact that you organize, it's the activity of your organization. It's not the fact that you organize as black men is not the problem. It's the activity of your organization. When I was in LA recently, got a bar out there. I'm out there a lot. So I was talking to my LA barber, old school cat named Vino. Vino, a few years older than me. Vino's an old school Crip. So we talk, you know, he's cool. But so last time I was out there, I was in the chair. He was like, man, we just had our players ball. Let's keep it real. Man, we just had our players ball. Man, we had Crips from around the world. I was like, V, think about what you just said, man. Think about what you just said. You don't have Republicans and Democrats in Germany. You don't. That's an American thing. Bro, you telling me you got Crips from Germany coming over here? Do you realize how powerful you are as a political party? You realize if you guys organize yourselves as political parties, if Davidson County votes blue, we know that. Williamson County's gonna vote red, we know that. We don't ride down to Williamson County and shoot it up just because they go different. It is what it is. Economic power is knowing and understanding your power base. How can we come together and understand the power? That's not, it's counterproductive. So you're right. Something is definitely happening since the death of Nipsey. And we definitely see, you know, through the life of Quincy Jones, and we see the influence that he has, and we see him using his platform to bring about change, and how he's used his influence to create a company. That's what we need more people to create companies that control the narrative, that control the content that we see. You know, he put out First Prince of Bel-Air. It's wholesome black entertainment. It is. It still gets played because it's wholesome black entertainment. It's missing. That's why it's as old as it is, and because there's a void. And so what that is a black man knowing what the void is in black media and fulfilling that void. Period.
There are 2 questions back here.
Okay.
One thing I wanted to say to the young man down there too, and to Richard, there are things that are happening around our country that are moving our young people and organizing them. I have 7 children. 2 or 3 of them are legends in the athletic area. But in 1993, we started a program called Loving the Player, Knowing the Game. And we had to run it underground because of you got to watch who you expose what you're doing to. So there are people, and especially in Murfreesboro, little Murfreesboro, there's on April the 28th, for example, there are a group of athletes that have put their egos, and not that they even had big egos, but they're organizing under Making an Impact under Corn Elder. And there are mothers of us that have children that did well in the athletic world, and we're trying to teach them that when you get these mega contracts, reinvest in the community. It was no reason the way that Henry and the guys in the African American Music Museum had to work so hard And we got all these multi-million-dollar contracts, not only across this country, but right in this state.
Come on.
So it's a process, and it'll take time. Like I tell my children, I may not see it in my lifetime, but I know what we're doing is going to be great. And they will remember that. And that's what's important. That's what Quincy got. And it makes you sad because sometimes you think at my age, I'm 62, I might not get to see it. But my oldest son, Ron, I had to reel him in and make him understand, learn to play the game on another level. And it doesn't matter what guys in the hood say, you selling out, you doing this. No, you opening doors. You making an impact. You get in there, and sometimes we have to do and get in places we might not want to get. But Quincy got it, man. He got it.
Yeah.
And we need to teach that to our children. They need to know who these people are. They need to know, we got some Quincys. You're a Quincy. It might not be that Quincy, but what you're doing, what Margaret has always been doing, Campbell Holman, always been doing, it makes an impact on our children. And so if you get that one Quincy or that one Margaret, and you just keep it going. April 28th, there will be 7 on a panel. And these are all athletes. So we're teaching them. We're doing what Quincy is saying. So don't give up. It's just like with the museum. When it opens, and it will open, and it'll be fabulous. They talk in Music City. It's coming. We just gotta keep believing. Okay.
What I was gonna say is, like, I know a lot of like rappers and things, and what I've noticed is when it comes to that subject matter, they are scared to save our people, right? Yeah. And when they start to, they tend to disappear, right? So you have like your Nipsey's just vanishing, and you have like your Michaels just vanishing, your Princes just vanishing, and what I'm really trying to figure out in my own mind is how are we going to be black leaders if we can't wear suits anymore, right? Because the second you put it on, you become a Martin, So I'm speaking from experience of not being able to wear suits to be able to reach the community. Is, I guess, what do you think could be a solve for us to where we can bridge that gap and not be afraid to help them?
There are a lot of talks that happen amongst us as a creative community. We talk all the time. I mean, and you're absolutely right. Like, when it comes time to, everybody feels that, everybody thinks that, but when it comes time to make that the content of your song, it doesn't happen. It's something else. And that's what it is. We have to come together and change the narrative as a creative community. But how does that happen? What do we all want? We all want the audience. That's what it's going to take. It's going to take us. It's going to take y'all. It's going to take you tweeting, messaging your favorite artist, saying, "Hey man, stop talking about that." After Nipsey died, I couldn't take it. Like, I don't want to hear nobody talking about shooting nobody. Like, it's too real. This ain't a video game, man. Stop talking like that. I got cousins I got a lot of family members that have died that way. That would have been me, but by the grace of God, I promise you. I promise you. And so it's crazy to think about this, man. I don't even hear that narrative anymore. So why does it have to be, does it have to be negative to be jamming? So that's what it is. And I think that a lot of that falls on us. I think we got to climb up. We need to have our creative civil rights movement. And the people need to rise up, and we need to tell artists, stop it. No more. We don't want to hear it. We're not buying it. We're not listening to it. We're not streaming it. Nothing. We're going to turn our backs on that, and we're not paying attention to that. It's detrimental. Kids are getting more information from the music than they are books while you poison the water. Stop it. So that's what it is. One thing, Quincy said, and we're going to wrap this up. I'm going to turn it over to Dion. He said when he won that Grammy, that's the first Grammy he won on his own name as an artist. But he said, "I've been a member of this academy since 1958. You hear him say that? I looked it up while I was sitting there. The academy, he's talking about the Recording Academy, which is the Grammys. The academy was founded in 57. So that means Quincy was around from at least the first year. And I thought about it because we just celebrated the 61st Grammy Awards, either 61st, 62nd, I think 60, maybe the 62nd. 62nd, right? We just celebrated the 62nd Grammy Awards. So I'm thinking about it like, wow, do the math. Like, yeah, that's all that time. Quincy's been a member of the Grammys, of the Record Academy, all that time. Now watch this. 2015 to 17, I was Nashville's first Black Grammy chapter president. So when you think about how much time has passed, and to think about like, wow, you think about what a trailblazer he really is. It's like, wow, light years. So that being said, we're gonna wrap it up. Thank you so much for allowing me to moderate this panel. Like I said, when I found out that it was even happening, I told Pierre, listen, we're gonna fight if I can't do this. Like, whoever you get as a moderator, I'm jumping them. As we try to walk through the door, I'm doing it. So thank you all for having me. Thank you for being here.
So Shannon is telling the truth. He did threaten to jump me and Perry and stop the whole show if he's not the moderator. And there's no one else that could have done it better. Thank you, Mr. Shannon, all caps, Sanders. Also, I want to thank Ron. Thank you for imparting your knowledge as well as Music Queen. I appreciate you being here and for all of you.